Hello, everyone, and welcome. Yes, my name is Arafire. Welcome to the 50th episode of All Talk No Shock, where I am joined by who else? Billy from TFNation. Billy, thank you very much for coming along today.
No problem at all. Thank you for inviting me. I've been watching the channel since before we met. Actually, I was there in the luscious long hair days. Um, I'm very pleased to be here on 50. Did you say?
50,
Um,
50 episode of,
wow.
yes. It's
Gosh.
amazing how much you can just talk and ramble, and occasionally people come back. God knows why, but they come here today because of you. And for anyone who doesn't know, and how could you not know? Billy is very much a mastermind and part of a big, wide crew who run and set up for our viewing pleasure TF Nation, Europe's largest Transformers convention, to which I and many of us in the community are very grateful for all that you do. So, with that being said, we have a mini con, a mini convention coming up in Reading in 2 and a bit weeks' time. You'll probably know the back of your eyelids, I would have thought.
Yeah, something like. Well, it's the 23rd of November, but
It is.
I'm not accepting how many weeks away it is right now. So yeah,
Sometime
it's
in
about
the decent
seven
future.
months. Yeah,
No,
we're
no
coming up
anxiety,
pretty
no
soon.
pressure. But with going into that, I want to talk a little bit around TF Nation as a whole and the convention, but obviously try and condense down towards the mini con in Reading. So, Billy, let's start with how how has it started, and how has it grown year on year? And I can certainly give my involvement in that and see what I've seen from when I've attended. And as we've said, I wasn't there in the very beginning, which I think was 2016, first TF Nation.
Yes.
Yes, my first one was 2018. So, how was it for you? How did you come about saying you and others saying we want to run TF Nation? We want to board this child ourselves.
Well, it all started way before TFNation for us. So my first ever Transformers convention was supposed to be Auto Assembly 2007, to coincide with the live action movie. I had a load of mates online in the fandom who tried to bully me into coming every year, and I quite notoriously would not do anything in person. I was like super anxious, super worried about meeting people, wasn't my bag, was happy just being online. And eventually, um, after 2006, they got like a big sheet and everybody autographed it for me. And they gave it to like Simon Furman. He autographed it. Andrew Wildman. He didn't know who I was, of course, because I'd never been. So he was like, "Who is this to?" and autographed it anyway. I was like, "Oh, they've gone to effort. I'm going to have to meet them now." So I decided I'd go along 2007. Um, and I couldn't because the convention had a gap year. So I had to wait another year. And then 2008, that was my first convention. Um, and then from that point on, I became a volunteer at the convention. I think I started volunteering in 2009, because I very quickly realized that I feel awkward if I haven't got something to do. And that's just me generally. If you put me down in front of a movie, I'll want a laptop so I'm doing something. I always feel like I need to be doing something, or I feel guilty or whatever. I don't know. So I got involved in volunteering, and then I guess moved up the volunteering ranks, if that's what you want to call it. Um, by the end of Auto Assembly in 2015, I was the deputy, which essentially meant I didn't have anything to do with the running of the organization, but I ran the on the day event, if that makes sense. So the lead organizer would put the pieces in place, and then on the day, I had to put the people in place to move tables and stuff.
You were on the shop floor.
Basically, yeah, that was it. So when that event came to an end, that retired. I obviously got on really well with the crew. Kind of unanimously all came together and said, we don't want this to end, really. Obviously, it's not our decision to end the convention, but we felt that the community was strong and still needed a convention. And if for no other reason, then everybody enjoyed it, to be honest. So that's where TF Nation came from. We all sat around, came up with names for what this thing could be. I dismissed lots of them because they sounded awful. We settled on TF Nation, and yeah, that's it. And it all kind of went from there.
Excellent. And how do you feel it's grown? It's obviously quite a gap from 2016, but what is going to be coming up? Nearly 10 years of TF Nation. I hate to put a big double digit number on it, but it's which is a great achievement in and of itself. But from your side, for your eyes, how has it grown? How has it changed?
Strange, we've just to answer that in a funny way first, and then a proper answer. So we've got big plastic box in our storage unit labeled archive box. And like the idea behind the archive box was, oh, we've made this poster, this teddy bear, that or whatever we've done, we'll lash one in there. And then at some point in the future, 10 years will have gone by. Maybe we'll show everyone what's in there. And like
A time capsule.
that box, yeah, and it filled up quicker than I thought it was going to fill up. Let me tell you. So I might need to change that to 15 years or
Oh no,
something.
don't hold out on us like that. We want to see.
Well, it's just prototypes for things, so it's like things you've already seen, just a little bit jankier. So yeah, that's my archive box story. But as for how it's grown, for me, it's never really about the number of people who come, although that is important because at the end of the day, it costs a lot of money and has to pay for itself. It's more about how it's grown in terms of diversity. I always say this to everybody. When I first started going to Transformers conventions, everybody looked like me. And like for the first 1 or 2 years, there were maybe one or two females in attendance. And that was it. It was a very binary sort of audience. Whereas today, you've got people of all different ethnicities, genders, ages, people from all over the world. Like it's a real mix of everybody. And that's, to be honest, that's probably my single favorite thing about TF Nation is that I don't think it really matters what walk of life you're from. I think it's reached a stage where you can just go in there now and feel comfortable, no
Absolutely.
matter what you look like or dress like, unless you dress like me, like a barcode, which is ridiculous. But I think generally, yeah, that's the key thing for me when you ask about growth. It's not necessarily the size; it's the demographic, if you will.
I've really noticed that myself, particularly in the last year or two at least, just to pick them out. It's so from all walks of life, and it's really a beautiful thing that you created. Not to blow smoke as such, but you really have created a place that we all have a common interest, but it's all backgrounds, it's all different starting points, it's all different orientations, and you really do see it if you walk into an August TF Nation, the big TF Nation, and you see it in a wide open area. You really do see it's people from all walks of life, and testament to you all. You really made it a safe haven to be such.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, you'll get a different version of this from everyone you speak to. I like to think that what we do is we've not necessarily created it, but we've facilitated what the fandom was anyway, and just hopefully given the fandom a place where they can come to that better reflects everybody. Like these fans were already there. There were, female fans in the 80s. Even though it may have been classed as a boys' toy line, it wasn't all boys.
No,
Everyone at early events, or most people may have been of the same, I don't know, ethnicity, but that was never the case either. I think so. It's not that we've done that. What we've hopefully helped with, though, is just creating an atmosphere where people can feel comfortable being themselves in that environment. So that's what we strive for.
excellent, and you've really achieved that. So going on then, let's talk around minicon. And you and I have briefly spoken around minicons. I think when you first tried them, this particular will be the first minicon down south, certainly down in Reading. But minicons in general, mini conventions, what was your thoughts behind them into rather than just having the one annual event to having effectively satellite events?
Hmm. So the minicon idea has been around for years because this was sorry to reference it, but this was a pre-COVID, pre-pandemic thing, which we were planning, which for obvious reasons didn't happen, and everything in life went back a couple of years because of it. Excuse me. So
Mhm.
it's something that's been in the pipelines for a while. The idea really is to it's about that inclusivity thing. because we've made the big event as welcoming as we can make it, I think. Although we'll always try and improve it if we can. Um, but big events in and of themselves can be off-putting to people. Like I mentioned earlier, the reason I had not come along to a convention for years was because I thought, oh, hundreds and hundreds of people, and I feel anxious, don't want to go to that. So it's kind of a nod to those people who feel a bit on the fence about it, and also there are people who just can't come because geographically, Birmingham's in the middle of the country, which is hopefully useful for a lot of people. But if you live at one of the extremes, that's a long journey. Um, or if you live abroad, we do have international attendees for the mini-con. So the idea was to do something more regional and definitely smaller, to give people a taster. So new attendees could come along, have a taste of what it's about, see if they wanted to come to the big event, or attendees who do come to the big event and who really like it get the chance to have that experience again in a smaller fashion, see their friends again without committing to two huge events every year. So that's kind of it. And hopefully we've found a decent middle ground there between a convention and what we call a gathering, a pub meet. We do those as well,
Mhm.
but hopefully that's a nice middle ground for people.
Yeah, I think you've absolutely captured that because I've seen people on Facebook and other platforms when they say they really want to attend, but they're not great in large gatherings. And going back to Big TFNation in August, and particularly one just gone, you're knocking on the door of 2,000 attendees over the course of a weekend, which is really something. I really can't commend you highly enough for that. Which is great for not just yourselves, but for fans as well, that they feel they can come. But there will be a portion that feel that that is a huge number and wouldn't do them so good. So a mini con would hopefully tick a box on. As you say, you're giving that accessibility, which really is only going to help other parts of the fandom more.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be honest with you. Like, this makes absolutely terrible business sense, but it's just true. Like, sometimes I'll tell people not to come to Big TF Nation, or certainly not for the full weekend. Like, if somebody gets in touch, which we encourage people to do, if they get in touch and say, I feel anxious in crowds, or maybe I'm claustrophobic, or whatever it is, like, get in
Mhm.
touch and ask our advice. Like, we'll sometimes say try a mini con first, or maybe try a Sunday if Birmingham's better for you. Because Saturday morning is when it's really busy. By Sunday, still quite busy, but it's a lot more chill.
Yeah,
So it's all about finding. Like I always think that the convention, speaking of the bigger convention, but the littler ones to an extent, they're really what you make of them. Like just because we say the trader hall opens between this hour and this hour, and here are the panels, doesn't mean you have to run back and forth and do everything. So you can really find your own place and just see what you enjoy doing.
yeah. And I think the Sunday advice for Big TF Nation makes a lot of sense because you're right. The Saturday morning portion in particular, well, really not limited to morning, but especially with the trade hall opening, that's when it can be full on. And so for people who aren't so au fait with that, then the minicon will make a lot of sense. I say that I hold my hands up. I haven't been to a minicon, so this will be my first one. Your previous ones have been in Manchester, so this will be my first minicon attendance. So I'm looking forward just to see through my own eyes how this varies from Big TF Nation, but I'm looking forward to it nevertheless.
But the kind of
Yeah.
interesting thing with mini cons is that I'd set up a plan for the Manchester one, and then if it did well, maybe we'd look at something else. And it all revolved around the venue. But as things happened, venues get refurbished sometimes and things change. And so we've never actually had a return venue for a mini con yet. So really
Oh,
hoping this time next year we'll have a return venue somewhere or other, because each one has been a complete
new
full build.
location.
You know what I mean? I'd
Yeah.
love to just go in knowing where the plug sockets are for once, but yeah,
Well, you and I have spoken in one of the London gatherings about the challenges of finding venues, and particularly ones in the south of England, without venturing into London and stupid money and the likes. And it's a challenge, and not one we necessarily need to labour on, but it's very much a logistical challenge, not just for traveling purposes, but just general finances, money, and And particularly people who are staying over in hotels, you start coming down to more expensive parts of the world. Accommodation will be another factor, and sadly another reason not to attend. So I think you picked a good middle ground with Reading. Certainly, with it being quite a transport hub, it should give people some nice traveling options.
We hope so. I mean, the two. I mean, there are lots of things, but the two things in particular that Reading had going for it transport wise are it really opens the door, and I'm seeing this in people ordering their tickets. It opens the door to people coming over from Bristol and Cardiff. Um, but really, the big thing was the Elizabeth line now being complete from London for a few years
Mm.
now. Obviously, you'll know that. I imagine that's perhaps how you'll get in actually. So it's
I've got about three ways of getting there, so I'm fine. Yeah,
oh,
I'll probably do a Paddington out if I'm honest, but I could do the Elizabeth line. And I can do Waterloo around in Waterloo to anywhere. It's actually it's actually quicker by public transport than it is to drive. As the crow flies, it's nothing. But if I drive, it's the M25. But you don't need to worry about my logistics, Billy. You're not putting this on for me. Although I've
yeah,
got
I'm
some
just
thought
just
out.
you and a lot of other people, hopefully.
Okay, so let's go on to the next point I've got.
Mhm.
It, it's very much a general question, but I say this because of something I saw about a TFCon convention in America, and this is certainly not to bash TFCon in any way, shape, or form, but a comment I saw a year or two ago. How do you, as a convention, stay fresh? How do you fall in? How do you not fall into a trap of putting the same panels and shows and events on each year? How do you keep it fresh for wanting to attract new eyes, but also for returning guests?
So, to quote someone on the team, who may or may not have stolen this quote from someone famous, I don't know, but Andrew Turnbull, who's on the team, he always answers this question or questions like it by saying, the idea is to do different, not bigger. And I think that's a really apt way of describing what we do. So, like the best example I can give is in 2018, we had Stan Bush over for a concert, which I really enjoyed, and that was like a bucket list
So good.
thing.
So good.
Um, but like, if we were not in that mindset, the temptation would have been, okay, 2019, let's do that concert again, but can we get a support act, or can we get an extra encore, or whatever it is? And that's fine. And I'll stay on the Stan Bush theme for this answer, actually. And this is absolutely no disrespect to Stan, quite the opposite, in fact. But at some of the international conventions, um, Stan will attend but doesn't get to perform now. And he'll perform occasionally still. But the deal is, if you have a good thing too often,
Yeah.
it becomes difficult for people to justify that extra ticket cost all of the time. Would you pay for the same concert every year? Now, for me, for Stan Bush, yes, I'll be honest, I would, but not everybody would. And so that's one example of it. We always try and do things a little bit differently, just to change it up, and also very much in the knowledge that every convention is somebody's first convention. So it almost doesn't matter what came the year before in terms of trying to top it. It's just a case of, right, what can we do this year with this arrangement of guests who are available, and these traders and these forges? What can we do with these components to make the best event we can on this occasion? So that's kind of how we do it. I can't speak for other events, but that's what we do.
Yeah, no, I I do get the temptation of, because I was there for the Stan Bush gig and it was magical. My first TFNation, so what a way to do it. And I said this actually in my roundup video that I did for TFN just gone in August, and I said because I particularly enjoyed August TFNation this year to the point I think that was my favorite TFNation. But I've
Cool.
still got that slot of Stan Bush gig, and that was pretty memorable. And as you rightly say, if you did that year on year, we as fans maybe wouldn't tire of that, but there will be others who have been like, I've seen him the last 2 3 years. Why do I need to see him again? And I do think there is a possibility that you could fall into that trap of just because it works so well, do it again. But as you say, you're looking at individual components and factors that change. We're quite lucky that the fandom is still growing in its way. It's still being pumped in with new toy lines, stories, films, new ideas, and so there is more to work with for you. But I can imagine it's a challenge, nevertheless.
It is, but I mean, that's the interesting part. Like, this to me is my favorite part of the year, other than when I get to see people, because this is the part of the year when the guest talks for next year um, have all been finalized or being finalized, and the guest talks for the year after are beginning. Um, and I always think that the guests are really important. Not necessarily the most important aspect. That's everyone who comes, that's the attendees, but they're important because they reflect the overall personality of the event. It's kind of like, in a weird way, it's kind of like having a toddler. So, like every year, the convention's reborn as a little baby convention. And then it's like, right, okay, so what's its personality gonna be? Because certain guests will bring a certain vibe with them that other guests won't. And certain guests, maybe they're the most fantastic guest on stage, but they don't really like hanging out and having lots of people around them. So it's like,
Yeah,
okay, so we've got this guest who's great on stage. Maybe we need one who's really great with people as well, to pair with them. So it's kind of like a recipe, I guess.
yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting because you get to see how it grows, and then once the pieces are in place, then we can go to, back to Dave Wallace and be like, right, here's the kind of pieces you've got to play with this year. He's involved in that part as well. But once they're signed off, here you go. Um, what can we now do with these pieces that's a bit different to what we've done before, maybe?
Talking as you've gone on to actors as well, actors, guests, attendees that come along. We'll talk around something that's quite what's the term I want to use? Very much part of TFNation's DNA, very much an integral bit, and that is around the no autograph money policy. Now, I say this because, and to those people who don't know, and I'll quote you, Billy, as best I can, but please keep me honest if I'm wandering off track. You're
Mhm.
very much the view is that your attendees price package that they pay, everything should be included in that. You don't want to go down the road of optional extras. Yes, you can come and to the convention, but you don't want to say you pay to get in. Now you've got to pay a bit more to see this particular voice actor. You've got to pay a bit more to get a signature off them as well. What you pay is what you get. And has that, we sort of know it has presented some challenges because very much in America and other conventions around the world, a lot of actors or voice actors or people who attend conventions, they do tend to have people come up and ask for money for signatures and photographs and the like. So has, I want to say straight away, I think it's incredibly commendable that TF Nation have that firm stance on it. And I think it's something that really separates TF Nation from other conventions. But I do realize as well that that gives you guys some challenges. How do you address that year on years? How do you keep your principles as well as try to attract the names?
It's that's a good question because it's a constant challenge. So to clarify that a little bit, because and rightly so, people ask me about it every year. Um,
Sorry to dig
so
up
for
old bones.
example, that's all. It's a good question though, isn't it? So for example, someone asked me a couple of years ago, why am I having to pay for a selfie with a guest? You've got a no charging for autographs policy. So yeah, but a selfie's not an autograph. It's that simple. So the way it kind of works with us is that when I speak with the guests, unless there's a very rare exception, which I'll speak to you about in a second, I always say to them, look, here's our stance. We know it's different to other events you may have done, usually in America, Canada. Um, but our attendees have to pay a premium to enter our event. And the reason for that is because we're not based in LA, so we can't say to you, do us a favor, drive in one day, sell some autographs, and then go home again. What we have to say to you is, here's your international travel. here's your payment for your week's worth of lost earnings. Now come and enjoy the event. So
Yeah.
in exchange, we say to them, look, if we're front loading that payment for you, we think that every attendee should have the right to come and say hello to you within reason. You know, obviously, if we had 10,000 one year, which I don't think we would have in that venue, but if we did, maybe we'd have to revisit it. But that's kind of the starting point. And I always phrase it to the actors in particular, because it's that world where the autographs are a big thing. I always say, look, we don't want you to be sat having to sign 20 free autographs because somebody's brought every DVD they own and then they're going to go on eBay because that
Got
defeats
you.
the whole purpose because the people behind in the queue don't have a good experience there. So we say, look, for our part, we'll ask attendees to limit it to one or two items. Um, for your part, if it goes over that, that's when you're within your rights to either politely decline or say, well, hang on a minute. You know, like if a guest were to turn around and say to me, I'll sign up to three autographs, but the fourth one, I don't know, for example, I'm going to charge for that. Like, I wouldn't have a problem with that because I feel like the attendee has had their experience at that point. I think if you're bringing an armful of everything you've ever owned, I think you're maybe not in the queue for the right reason at that point. But one of the things that we also do with that, and this is where, particularly since the pandemic, the selfies and things like that have come into play more, is I like to treat our guests, all of our guests, the same. So, like, if you're an artist, I don't stop you from selling an example of your work, which is a sketch at your table. So, likewise, I'm not going to stop a guest from selling a voice recording if somebody really wants it. We don't take a cut of that.
It's another form of art to be sold, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really is the autograph thing for us, and it does provide challenges. Um, there definitely have been occasions where we've not been able to proceed with some guests, unfortunately, because that was just a contractual issue that um, they were not able to agree with in line with the terms with their own management and stuff. Um, but it's really cool because I always think if a guest does come to us and you see that guest, not only do you know that they're there at the convention, um, they're probably there because they really, really want to be. And that's
I
really
was going to pick up on that because that means that you've been able to get the right-minded guests coming along.
cool.
You know, they understand the situation, and it's not about money for them. It's about driven by passion as much as anything else, and that's very much that should be praised for both the guests coming along and for yourself. Okay, so talking about the growth of TF Nation, and recently there was a nice little, I don't want to say partnership, it might not be too strong a word, but interactions with Paramount around Transformers One, getting at least one, if not more, early screenings to the new film. So that's got to be a bit of a badge of honor for TF Nation, isn't it? To be reached out to, presumably.
Yeah, it was cool. It was we got two invites actually. So the way it worked was Hasbro Pulse got in touch at first. And it was really interesting because they were like, we've got this screening of a movie. We can't tell you what it is. So, okay, got an idea what this movie is. So like, right, okay. We can give you two tickets. One's for you and one's for someone else on the crew. Okay, fantastic. When's the date? Here's the date. Can you come or not? I'm like, can you tell me where it is? I'm like, we can't tell you the location. I'm like, okay, can you tell me the country? Because this wasn't Hasbro Pulse England are speaking to me. This was somebody else.
Oh, right.
So eventually they revealed it wasn't indeed something I could get to. I'm like, okay, that's really good. Um, so we were going to go thinking it was more of a like, it was two tickets. It was like, okay, well, this is like a corporate thing. We'll go with anything else just to say thanks for inviting us. That's really nice. And then Paramount UK, so I knew the country, got in touch like the next day actually. I don't know if they corresponded or not. Like they got in touch like it was a completely new lead, and they were just like, "Hey, we've got this screening. Do you reckon you can fill a load of seats?" Like, yeah, absolutely. Like how many? And they're like, well, maybe between this many and this many. And I'm like, well, I could, but I don't like this word between because I don't want to invite someone and then their ticket isn't firm. So they're like, okay, well, here's just you seem confident you can do it for us. Here's like a full like 30 tickets or whatever it was. I don't know. Like, can you do this? Like, yeah, cool. Um, so we did a split, and I checked it with them first. So we did a split. So if we invited some crew, and then we did like a giveaway. Um, which was cool. And then they got in touch and give us tickets to another viewing. And they were like, "Yeah, invite anyone you like. It's all good. Like, we're happy with you." Because I don't know how many people they speak to. I guess this is the thing. I guess when you've got a cinema ready for an early viewing, you want it as full as possible because it's a feedback session as much as anything else. So I don't know how many people drop out, but obviously our crew had gotten along, our attendees had. So they're happy with us. So they're like, yeah, can you do that again? And we managed to bring along some other fine, upstanding members of the community, and hopefully all had a good time. I only got along to one of them myself, but it's a bit of a trek for me. But yeah, it was a good day out.
I mean, yes, some fine and some questionable people in the community, of course. But yeah, it was for me. It was a great way of doing it. And I remember thinking at the time, I'm like, that's a badge of honor for TF Nation to be asked, to be noticed, to be reached out by Hasbro Direct and a company like Paramount really must solidify your status. I mean, look, we say the term Europe's biggest Transformers convention. That carries some weight if you're getting the almighty Hasbro and a company like Paramount reaching out to you. And as you rightly say, it plays them back as well. It's a feedback session. It's what they want, and I understand that. Um, from my selfish experience, I enjoyed it so much more. I said this at the time because I was with like-minded people,
Hmm.
and it felt like going to one of the TF Nation gatherings. It was like you might not necessarily know everyone on first name basis, but you sort of feel like, oh, I know you. I saw you, and I actually saw the person who dressed up as Thunderhoof in the cosplay at TF Nation in August, and of course, I didn't recognize you without your massive antlers. It's nice to do it like that, and for me, I enjoyed the film all that much more because I was with friends to do it. But I thought at the time that was a pretty big swing for TF Nation. To be asked is nice enough.
Hopefully, it's like I'm limited in what I can say, but like we have discussions with various parties over the years. Not like a an ongoing discussion, but we've had several discussions at several times about several different projects and stuff. So, but as is the case in the corporate world, um, people move on from their positions very quickly. People are promoted to other positions and this, that, the other. So, like having an ongoing relationship can be difficult sometimes. So it was really good. I mean, complete transparency. Both people who I liaised with, one was the head of Paramount UK publishing, I think, or promotions, and the person at Hasbro Pulse, they were both new contacts to us. So that was really interesting. So it wasn't just somebody kind of remembered us from like a previous conversation. So yeah, it's good. It's like, look, at the end of the day, what we do is we run a convention for Transformers fans, but way back before our first event, way back in 2015, we had a meeting, which is not subject to one of those funny agreements. So I can tell you about it. We had a meeting just in a coffee shop with someone from Hasbro, and we laid out all of our banners on the table and everything. And we were like, look, here's what we want to do. Um, you'll note we're not using your trademarks. We're very overtly telling people we're a fan run thing. Like, have you got any problems with that? Um, and they were fine. It's like obviously it's very different going from we have no problems to we officially endorse you. Those are different things.
Of course.
And we would never want people to think one is not the other. But we've been very open with all invested parties from the outset as to what our aims are. Our aim has never been to present ourselves as an official event. Our aim has been to say, hey, look, there's a great community who loves this thing that you're producing. We're going to promote that thing for the benefit of that community. So yeah, it was good. It was nice, to be honest, and it was nice that Paramount came through with those additional tickets, because it felt a bit awkward being offered two tickets to a cinema screening when there are far more than two of us on the crew.
Yeah.
So I was able to turn around and bring along some other organizers, some volunteers. Like, that made it a really nice 2 days, I guess. So
Okay, well, let's talk around the minicon itself. 'Cause I feel we've almost kind of ignored the elephant in the room. So let's talk around Reading. The lineup. How much can you confirm around the lineup? Because I feel that in true TFNation fashion, you do keep it somewhat hidden from us until maybe a day or so out. But is the lineup more or less confirmed now for the scheduling of the day?
So the lineup in terms of the guests is and has been confirmed for a little while. I've got a list here just so I didn't forget. We're going to be joined by Simon Furman, Nick Roach, Ed Perry, John Paul Beauvais, and Chris Carter, who are an array of Transformers comic book professionals, for anyone who might not know those names straight off the go. But do jump on TF Wiki if you're unfamiliar with any of them. In terms of the schedule, yes, the schedule is locked in at this point. Pending any weird convention things happening, you could always get someone who's delayed on the motorway and you have to switch things. But yeah, the convention is locked in. It's an interesting one, this convention. If you get a chance to speak to David Wallace, speak to him about it, because like he's really passionate about what we're doing at this one. Because he and Andrew Turnbull, I believe, also on the team. Primarily, they've been able to come up with some lost media, I guess is the best way to put it. They've come up with some lost media from a comic book that ended on a cliffhanger from several years ago. So yeah, come along and see it. Now, I'll be honest with you, and I think I'm a good example of why this might be a good panel for anyone. I've not read the preceding comic book. I, I don't know what that story is, but I'm interested in it from the point of view of how do you take something which is an outline of a blueprint
Mhm.
and then turn it into a reality 10, 15 years later, whatever it is, so in fact, it's longer than theory, mate. A long time later, how do you do that? So,
Age
but,
hurts.
but if you are a fan of that comic book, then it's a double whammy for you, I guess. So that's one of our big things that we're doing. And then the other things that we tend to repeat at mini cons. I know you've not had a chance to come along to one yet, but um, we run a panel called Optical Enhancement, which is a panel. It's a panel with a revolving cast, and it typically involves some of our comic book guests. And depending on the technology available, the panel might be slightly different. But what we attempt to do is to have one comic book guest talking us through and showing us through the process of sketching a piece, because it's quite easy to just think that guy's good at drawing, but there's so much more to it than just drawing something off the top of your head. Like there's,
Mhm.
people work on this for decades for a reason. There's a lot to it. Um, and then we pick that panel up again later in the day with one of our guests who focuses on being a colorist, and we look at, right, okay, now that you've got a piece, how do we turn that from a line drawing or an ink drawing into something that's more of a final product? Sometimes it's one piece throughout the day, sometimes it's multiple pieces. Depends on whether the first one's finished in time, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But it's really good, and it's something that we do that on purpose because it's something a little bit different to Big TF Nation. It's almost a bit more. I mean, you're still seated in an audience because of the number of people there, but it's almost more of a workshop kind of vibe to it. And it's quite chilled out. You can ask questions. We have a microphone there whilst the artist is talking through and performing their work. So yeah, those are the big things. And as ever, if we appreciate it's a long day. So if there are some people who are good enough to stay along right until the closing ceremony, we'll do our best to make that worth your while as well.
That sounds quite interesting for me. I've actually got a few questions around going from an artist drawing just a black and white line to colorists as well. So for me, that's something that I'm going to be quite intrigued with. Um, but of course, with it being held in more or less a university campus, isn't it, or the Great Hall? Um, just remind me. I don't know if you've said this, so apologies if you have. What's the spaces like available? Are you limited to how many you can get through the door?
Yeah, so I mean, to be fair, that's true of every space in the world, isn't it? Like every building has a capacity limit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the capacity limit for us, and I mean this in a nice way, it almost doesn't matter because no matter what the capacity officially of a hall is, we're going to undersell that because most hall capacities are based on how many people you can get in a theater formation, rows of seats.
Yeah,
We have loads of tables filled with toys, so we're
yeah,
always going to downplay that. So um, the kind of idea for this is to keep it a somewhat similar level of attendee to the Manchester events, a couple of hundred people, something like that. It is capable of holding double that. But particularly for a first event, it's more important to us that it's an enjoyable event for people. Like I think the worst thing you can do is look on a chart and say, "Oh, this says I can get 600 people in here. Let's sell 600 tickets." And then everyone has a terrible event because you haven't factored in all the other spaces.
yeah.
So much that can potentially go wrong with a new venue, that I think the onus is on the event planner to just make sure it goes right. Like do everything you can to keep it right. And then if you find that actually it went really well, well enough that we want to do the event again, but there was extra room, then fine. You can always revisit that in a future year. But in the first instance, let's keep it at a nice level for people, basically.
To that point, then, how are ticket sales looking? If someone is watching this for the first time and they're somewhat sitting on the fence, is it a last few remaining? Are people going to snap up what's left?
No, it's not last year. It's approaching the so the last Manchester Minicon was as I said, in Manchester, sadly, we had to keep switching venues because of renovations. Manchester, if anyone isn't aware of it, it's a city that's always rebuilding and transforming, I suppose. So we've had to keep switching venues. The most recent venue was the largest venue that we'd had of the Manchester events. Um, we're approaching that capacity at the moment. There is a little bit more capacity thereafter because, as I say, it's a bigger venue in Reading.
Mhm.
Won't be, I think, loads of capacity thereafter. So I'm not going to spook people by saying last few tickets because that's not correct. Um, but we probably are into the last couple of dozen tickets. I think that's probably a fairer way to put it. So it's an event that seems to be selling well. Um,
Good.
in terms of pattern, it's been much more akin to our first Manchester event. So our first Manchester event was kind of a slow burn through the year, kind of like Big TFNation is. And then toward the end, more people buy tickets. The
Yeah.
second Manchester event sold out in like under 48 hours. It was ridiculous. Just gone. Um, so this is repeating the pattern of that first event, which is it's just interesting to see
Yeah.
how the locality changes things.
Excellent. Well, I've got my ticket. I got it pretty early on. For me, it's nice not to have to wait to August to get that TFNation buzz again. And I think this is going to be a nice stopgap. And even you might get a southerner like me traveling up to Manchester in the early part of the year. If indeed there is Minicon, not saying there is, not saying there isn't. I don't know schedules, but I might make the long commute up to north. But yeah, no, Billy, it's been great having you on. Thank you so much for passing your time and your wisdom. As I've said, you're very much an open book when it comes to this stuff. And I think for us as fans, we do not see what goes on, not fully. And from talking to you, bumping into you in the corridors, and for whatever you're part of opening and closing ceremonies, we just get a little bit more insight into how you set up these big conventions. So thank you for everything that you do and put on the great show that you do for us.
No problem at all. And look, like I say, like the reason we do it is because we're all part of this community. We enjoy this community. Like there's so many nice people in here, and it's just a great albeit expensive hobby to have. So, we have to, exactly. So let's do what we can for people. So no, and I really appreciate the time today. It's especially a big honor to be here for the big 50. I'm looking forward to 100 and what the hair may be at that stage. Um,
Bald, if
I
anything.
think the beard is better than ever. I can't do a beard, so
It's
I'm
it's
very envious.
so it's ginger, but quite grey now, unfortunately. That's what 4.5 years on YouTube will do to you. But what can you say? We'll just finish off then, Billy. Let's talk around. I'll put all the details in the description for going to TF Nation's website, going to get some tickets for the minicon. I'll put it all in the description so you haven't got to travel far. Let's talk around. I did touch on this briefly when I had Dave Wallace on the channel recently, but let's talk around TF
Oh,
Nation's
that guy.
Patreon.
Oh.
Oh yeah, Dave, good old Dave. But let's talk around the Patreon and sort of other aspects of how people can enjoy TF Nation without actually going to TF Nation.
Yeah, sure thing. So the Patreon, thanks for mentioning it because I always forget to and I really shouldn't. But one of the ways that I've been explaining it recently when we've put things on social media is we've kind of like made it a bit geeky, but we've said that the Patreon helps us to keep our cogs spinning between events. But it really does. I mean, like, yeah, I don't mind telling you, the Patreon rather, is why there's still a TF Nation now because during the pandemic, not to get political, but we were in a position where we didn't want to run an event which could be held at a time when people could get ill. But regardless of that, it wasn't allowed for us to run an event at that time. So we were, if you think about it, it's an events company. It can only make money from hosting events. They were illegal at that point, and yet there was no government assistance either. So we still had all the bills that we normally have, but no way of generating income. So like the patron really helped us. So they're all heroes in my book, and that's the patron is still there today. We're putting probably more content on it than ever at the moment, and it's a real mixture of stuff. It's David, again, harkening back to the pandemic, has brought back the big broadcast, which is our version of this, really, our version of a conversation between a couple of people who have some involvement with the convention. Best of all, you get the Billy blog, and that is just me letting off steam about something nonsense. Like it might be something really interesting, like a particular guest negotiation, obviously with names redacted until I'm allowed to post them, or it might be me despairing that the van we've hired is 2 centimeters narrower than it needs to be to fit everything in easily. Like it's a real mix of. I
Oh,
enjoy that.
convention life.
Absolutely, absolutely. The convention stories, basically. It's one of those things. Every now and again, people say to me, you should write a book," and I'm like, "I can't." But I could write like lots of little short stories of weird things that have happened, and that's kind of what the my part of the Patreon has become. Plus early access and all of those things, and recently launched a Discord as well. So check it out. Yeah, I pop in sometimes, say hello to people, chastise them. Don't really. Um, sure they'd like it. So yeah, that's definitely something you can do. Um, and then it's not open right now, but we do also have merchandise on at the time of events. I think we'll probably look at making that like a year-round storefront at some point. I can see somebody here today is modeling what looks like a very fashionable TFN number. Um,
Shameless
so,
plug. Yeah, I was looking through my wardrobe of Transformer clothing, to which I'm not at all embarrassed to say is a wardrobe in and of itself. But I thought, what could I wear for it? And yes, it's not what I wear often enough, really. I do really like it. That and what was the other one that you released at the same time, which I ummed and ahed at getting, and it was oh, I hate them all. It was from the Hate Plague one.
oh,
Um,
Gregory.
yeah, that was it. Oh, I thought that was yeah, that was great. But Billy, again, thank you so much. I will put all the details in the Discord and everything else into the description. It's been a bit of a treasure trove of mine to get you on the channel and talk things TF Nation. So thank you so much for coming on. And again, thank you to all of the hard work that you and the rest of the TF Nation do all year round. So thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it.
And thank you all for watching. And as always, I will see you on the next one.